I bought a handsome man off the streets of Chang'an. For the sake of his mother and sister. He bent his back, swallowed his pride, and stayed by my side for 3 years. Later, he left without a trace of sentiment. When we met again, he was no longer the man I once knew. He had become the crown prince, standing high above the world, with my old nemesis in his arms. And I had become a courtesan dancer in the government-run pleasure house. He stared at me for a long time before forcing out a sentence from his throat. "Beg me, and I'll let you serve me." I sneered and sighed. "What a shame, Your Highness. I already serve someone else now." The springtime charm in the pleasure house was likely no different from elsewhere, mist rolling across thousands of miles, the chilly fog blending with fresh green grass and distant mountains. I sat in front of a small lattice window. A warm breeze drifted in as I lowered my eyes and lightly tugged at the crimson gown that failed to hide my pale complexion. I would have never worn clothes like this before. As the legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister's household, I was born into wealth and status, and even my face had to be hidden under a veiled hat. The door knocked. 13 Yong, the lead dance instructor of the pleasure house, pushed it open and stood at the threshold, saying indifferently, "Su Yueshang, it's your turn. Today's guest is someone truly important, so give it everything you've got." I picked up the beaded veil, covering half my face, lowered my eyes, and said quietly, "Understood. I'll head out now." To be honest, I wasn't skilled in dancing. What I had learned before were the refined arts meant for noble daughters. I only picked up dance after I entered the pleasure house. I didn't quite understand. If the guest was so important, why risk having me entertain him? 13 Young glanced at me and scoffed. "Are you really that clueless? Or just pretending? A prime minister's daughter ends up in a pleasure house. You think those men come to see your dancing? They come to laugh at you." Of course. I remembered now. Those young lords who once longed for me but couldn't have me now strutted openly into the pleasure house, arrogantly naming me to dance for them. Even the girls who used to hate me would dress up as men just to sneak in, pretending to be patrons and point at me for a performance. Then they'd toss a few coins of broken silver, cover their mouths with silk handkerchiefs, and burst into laughter. "Look, isn't this the same Su Yueshang who used to be so noble and untouchable? I heard she was raised like a crown princess. Who would have thought she'd end up in a brothel?" I lowered my head and pushed open the door to leave. The bells sewn into the hem of my dress chimed in the wind, slowly calming the bitterness and unwillingness in my chest. As I passed by the musician's room, I caught a few words drifting through the air. If I were her, I'd probably have no face left to live. First time I've heard of a disgraced official's daughter ending up in a brothel without crying or making a fuss. The other girls, soon as they heard they were being sent here, they all tried to kill themselves. Under the beaded veil, I curved my lips slightly. Dying? What kind of strength is that? Surviving? That's true strength. To stay alive, compared to that, this humiliation was like a breeze brushing past, nothing that could truly destroy me. Just before I went on stage, I finally found out the so-called important guest today was the crown prince, whom the emperor had recently brought back from commoner life. For generations, the daughters of the Su family had been the sole candidates for empress. A Su family daughter was always destined to marry the crown prince, no matter who held the title. I had only meant to see for myself what kind of man the emperor treasured so much. But the moment I saw his face, I froze. The drums had already begun, and the music was playing, but I stood motionless on stage. A maid nudged me, and only then did I snap out of it. Taking advantage of the dance's movements, I quickly lowered my head and masked my expression. At that moment, I was genuinely grateful for the veil. But still, Jianghezi, this man I once bought for 10 taels of silver. How had he become the crown prince? To be honest, when I bought him, I took advantage of the situation. He had encountered trouble on his way to the capital for the imperial exams, and I just happened to take a liking to his face. After weighing my options, I put in some effort and had him brought to my household. Calling it a purchase was a stretch. It was more like I kept him in the residence provided for him and even took good care of his mother and sister. I thought he would be grateful. But later I realized he truly hated me. And now, he stood at the peak as the esteemed crown prince. I, on the other hand, was nothing more than a dancer. If he recognized me, I probably wouldn't live to see another day. After all, I was one of the few people who knew about the darkness in his past. But no, I couldn't afford to die. I had to live. So I steadied my heart and focused, recalling every graceful move in this dance, Spring Warbler's song. In a daze, I could feel someone's eyes locked onto me from below the stage, sharp and unwavering, like an eagle in the night. That gaze rattled me. I stumbled over a few steps, but somehow I made it to the end of the performance. I bowed low and was just about to step down when a voice rang out from below. "Stop right there, Su Yuesheng." My scalp tingled as I turned my head. That's when I realized, sitting beside Jiang Heji was none other than my former nemesis, Bai Jingshu. She was dressed as a man and stood up smugly, loudly calling out my name. With my heart pounding, I glanced at Jiang Heji. He wore a robe of fine silk, modest in design but impossible to ignore. The air of command clung to him like armor. He sat lazily in the grand armchair, but his eyes, those wolf-like eyes, locked onto me, forcing me to halt in my tracks. Sweat pooled in my palms. I turned and gave a graceful bow. "Your servant has already finished the dance." Bai Jingshu strode over, yanked me into the light, and tore off my veil. I instinctively raised my hand to shield my eyes from the sudden glare, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. "I just had to see what you look like now, Su Yuechang." She stared at me and abruptly froze. Then she shoved the veil back at me. "Put on. Don't think you can use that seductive face to tempt His Highness." I reached to put the veil back on, but the man in the chair suddenly spoke. His voice was low and firm. "Leave it off." My hand stopped midair. I stood still, head lowered, waiting for his fury. I just hoped that once he'd humiliated me enough, his resentment would be appeased. Bai Jingshu smiled faintly at his words and returned to her seat with an air of smug elegance. She examined me for a moment, then picked up a teacup, but halfway through, she loosened her fingers and spilled half the tea down my body. Oh no, what's wrong with my hand today? Seems I just can't hold a cup properly. I wonder if this lovely dancer from the Jiaofeng department can be smart enough to make me another cup? She smiled sweetly as she looked at me. "Of course," I replied, lifting my hands to pour her a new cup of tea. I held it before her, but she didn't reach for it. Only then did I raise my head to look at her. "Kneel and serve it. I don't like people standing taller than me." Her voice was slow and airy. My fingers clenched around the teacup. For a moment, I couldn't move. I had endured worse humiliations as a dancer slave just to stay alive, so why should kneeling matter? Instinctively, I looked at Jiang Heji, wondering if he too was waiting to watch me be mocked. But what I saw was a taut jaw, his fingers clenching the armrest with controlled force. Bai Jingshu noticed me looking at him and turned to say, "Your Highness, surely a lowly convict dancer isn't above taking orders? If my father asks whether I had fun today, I can't very well say I wasn't entertained, can I?" Her father was the Grand General of Wuhan, commanding a quarter of Great Qian's army. His Emonan troops guarded the empire's southern border. I sighed silently. Bai Jingshu was truly foolish. After witnessing the fall of the Su family, I'd come to understand. Royalty is born suspicious and allows no rivals. No matter how shallow Jiang Heji's roots were, he was still the crown prince and one day, he'd be emperor. Threatening the future ruler so brazenly was pure stupidity. So I relaxed. It seemed I wouldn't be serving that tea after all. Yet just then, Jiang Heji, who'd been staring at me, suddenly exploded in anger. He slammed 2 fingers on the tea table and roared, "Who told you to dress like that?" "Dress like what?" I looked down at myself. The dance robe of a great Qian courtesan borrowed heavily from the attire of Hu women, just gauze wrapping around my waist and bare arms. A poet once described dancers like this: heavy ornaments on swaying hips, golden bells spinning, pale beauty turning. It was beautiful, undeniably so. But for Jiang Heji, who once saw me draped in pearls and dignity. This must have been shocking. I lowered my gaze. It's the dancer's costume. Your servant was summoned to perform. He didn't seem interested in my explanation. It was as if the sight of me in that outfit had tainted his eyes. He smashed the teacup and barked for everyone to leave. Apparently, his attendants were used to his temper. Even Bai Jingshu was persuaded to go. Then, as if nothing had happened, he glanced at me lazily and asked, "Su Yuechong, do you still remember me?" I thought it over. As crown prince, he wouldn't want anyone recalling his past as someone who lived under another's roof. This question, it was a test. So I answered carefully, "Your Highness jests. I've never met you before. How could I remember you?" I thought that answer was flawless. But the moment he heard it, he flew into a rage. He kicked over his chair and stormed up to me, gripping my chin hard as he growled, "Never met me? Never met me, Su Yuechong? You really are heartless. What? Did you buy so many men off the street you can't even keep track? Want me to help jog your memory?" I grabbed his arm with both hands, trying to break free, but his strength was overwhelming. I even had the presence of mind to wonder, how had the Jiang Heji I once knew, calm and polite, turned into someone so volatile? I didn't dare provoke him. I simply nodded. "I remember. Your Highness is Jiang Heji." Suddenly, he looked delighted. He let out a short laugh, released me, and sank back into his seat, playing with his thoughts in silence. Then, as if suppressing deeper emotions, he looked at me and said, "Su Yuechong, do you want to leave the Jiaofeng department? Beg me, and I'll let you serve by my side." I lowered my eyes and looked at that face, one that could ruin nations, trying to figure out his true intent. Did he want to keep me close, just to slowly torment me? Unfortunately for him, I couldn't give him that satisfaction. I sighed. "Your Highness, I'm afraid you're too late. I already belong to someone else." He sneered at my words, his tone tinged with bitterness, but his words were vicious. "Promise to someone else? Looking like this, dirty and used. Who would want you now? Do you still think you're that untouchable, radiant darling of the heavens? Dirty and used?" Jiang Heji probably didn't know that the courtesans in the Jiafengxi were government-owned and meant to entertain the court. Ordinary men didn't dare touch them. So despite it all, I was still untouched. But I didn't want to argue with him. No matter how filthy or cheap he thought I was, I didn't want to explain. Seeing me remain silent, veins popped on his forehead as he gritted his teeth and growled, Who's that dog behind you?" I ran a hand down my goosebumped arm, unsure how to respond. After all, this so-called someone else was only in my imagination.
He merely saw me as a stand-in.
Just then, a cool hand wrapped around my waist and a voice spoke near my ear. "That dog you're referring to, could it be me?" Startled, I looked up and saw a sharply defined face smiling at Jiang Heji. His fingers idly played with the crimson waist chain on me, completely ignoring Jiang Heji's murderous glare. In a calm voice, he said, "My dear nephew, so young and already bold enough to covet your royal uncle's woman?" This was Prince Xiao Jiming, the Duke of the North, a man of immense military power, and Jiang Heji's uncle. Jiang Heji had already stood up, all laziness gone. He was about the same height as Xiao Jiming, and now the two of them towered on either side of me like steep cliffs enclosing a valley.
"Uncle, you jest."
This courtesan is just a nameless criminal from the Jiafengxi, free for anyone to pick. How could she possibly be yours? Jiang Heji was still young, unable to keep his composure. No sooner had he finished speaking than he pried Xiao Jiming's hand off my waist and yanked me behind him, as if guarding some precious treasure, every muscle tensed as he stared Xiao Jiming down. Xiao Jiming looked at him the way one might look at a disobedient child. Then, tilting his head slightly, he turned his gaze to me, now shielded behind Jiang Heji. Known as the war god of the north, Xiao Jiming was a fearsome warrior soaked in blood, yet famous for his smile. He stretched out a hand confidently and called to me, "Yueshang, come here." I won't say it twice. Jiang Heji stood before me like a wall, bristling like a beast with spines, and warned without turning his head, Don't you dare. I glanced at Xiao Jiming's face, calm and determined, and quietly stepped to the right. 说得上. Jiang Heji's voice rang in my ears like thunder, but I walked straight to Xiao Jiming. Before I could get close, he pulled me firmly into his arms. Behind me, Jiang Heji's face turned cold and stiff. Instinctively, he reached out, but all he caught was a sleeve of crimson silk slipping through his fingers. Jiang Heji left in a storm, breaking several tables and chairs on his way out. Once again, I marveled. How had the gentle and elegant young man I once knew turned into such a furious little wolf? What are you looking at? Did you fall for the crown prince? Xiao Jiming leaned closer, playing with a strand of my hair. His tone was unreadable. I shifted away and looked at him.
No.
Are we playing the zither again today? Xiao Jiming had loved a woman for many years. Rumor had it he once searched the entire kingdom with only her portrait in hand. A few years ago, I caught a glimpse of that portrait and was stunned by how closely the woman resembled me, 7 or 8 parts alike. I never forgot it. So when the Su family fell from grace and I was thrown into the Jia Fangxi, I saw him, the famous Duke of the North, on my very first day. I remembered that day vividly. It was the day I fell from the clouds into the dust. Even though I accepted all kinds of humiliation just to survive, I still had my pride. A certain young masterly, who once publicly begged me for a poem at a spring banquet and was coldly refused, came running the moment I landed in the brothel, eager to enjoy the spectacle. He forced me to repeat a dance I hadn't yet learned, over and over. Then, egging on his friends, he had them throw embroidered money pouches onto the stage, hard pouches stuffed with silver, smashing them against my feet and forehead until tears welled in my eyes. The crowd below burst into applause and cheers at my tears. Look at this. This is the precious treasure Minister Su held in the palm of his hand, the arrogant legitimate daughter of the Su family. What has she become now? Obviously, a lowly wretch. Ha ha ha. Xiao Jiming appeared just as I bent down to pick up the pouches. He stepped out from the shadows, looking at me. Don't pick them up. Your hands shouldn't touch those filthy things belonging to men. I looked up at him, my face blurred with tears. At that moment, I decided to use the woman in the portrait he carried in his heart. Not now. Xiao Jiming interrupted my thoughts calmly. Tell me, how did you meet the crown prince? I remember when the crown prince returned to the palace, the Su family had already fallen. I don't know any crown prince. He only came today to watch me dance. Su Yuesheng, don't lie to me. You should know that as long as I want, there's no wall in this world that doesn't have cracks. He was threatening me. Everyone knew that half of the Dacian Empire was controlled by the Duke of the North. The Duke was always a thorn in the side of every emperor who succeeded the throne. He was fishing for secrets about Jiang Heji that weren't known to others.
What did he want to hear from me?
I answered half-truthfully. We met once on the street. I gave him some silver. Maybe that's why he remembered me. Xiao Jiming toyed with his wine cup and after a while smiled. Yuesheng, you've always been beautiful and kind. But from now on, don't help any men anymore. I don't like it, understand? I nodded. He probably didn't want to see someone with a face somewhat like his beloved entangled with other men. Prince, will you listen to Linghua melody today? I stroked the expensive guqin. Xiao Jiming had spent a fortune commissioning it. He once said his favorite thing was to watch the woman he loved play the Linghua melody on the golden thread Namu with guqin by his side. He didn't reply. His eyes still locked on me, a flicker of many emotions in his phoenix-like eyes. Then he asked again, what do you think? Would our crown prince remove your status and take you back? What exactly did he want? Why was he so persistent? My scalp tingled as I carefully considered his meaning and answered, I am a criminal, and if my status is to be revoked, only if my father's case is overturned. He laughed. Are you reminding me there's something hidden in Minister Su's case? I was silent for a long time. I didn't fully trust him, but my father had been an upright official for decades, always clean-handed and honorable. He could die for speaking honestly or serving the people, but never for greed or corruption. I dare not speak recklessly. I said with lowered eyes. Enough. I've told you many times, don't call yourself a slave before me. You are a Sioux. Don't degrade yourself. Xiao Jiming frowned, as if that word was offensive to his ears. Understood. I obediently replied. Yet somehow, he seemed struck by something. He flicked his sleeve and said sharply, "Lift your head." I looked up at him in confusion. The pearl veil over my face had vanished. He held my chin firmly and scolded. "Who allowed you to look down like this? Letting others bully you?" Sioux women have always been proud and noble, like fairies. The woman in my heart never made faces like that. If you're going to learn properly. He was probably talking about the woman he loved, a bold and dazzling lady. But I used to be bold and dazzling like her too. I'm no longer the Sioux Yueshang I once was. People change with their circumstances. How could I still have the strength to be fierce? Living is important, yes, well, living is truly important. I curled my lips into a faint smile and, complying with Xiao Jiming's strange demands, struck my old pose and said calmly, "Will we still listen to the melody today? If not, I'll go rest." In the end, Xiao Jiming didn't listen to the Linghua melody, but requested the Mountain-Breaking March, a warrior's song for battle. The commotion caused by Jiang Heji's arrival quickly spread throughout the entire music bureau. Everyone knew I hadn't properly received such a distinguished guest, and worse, I had offended him. I waited inside for Miss 13th's punishment order. Whether it would be a fine, kneeling punishment, or being sent to do laundry and fetch water in the back courtyard, I didn't know. But one thing was certain, I couldn't avoid being punished. After a long wait, my maid Qinghe finally pushed open the door with a bright smile. "Mistress, I asked around earlier and heard that it was the Duke of the North who gave the order. No one in the music bureau dares to offend the Duke, so you don't have to be punished today." I pondered this for a moment. It seemed that in this court, the Duke of the North's power actually outweighed that of the Crown Prince. Apparently, I hadn't chosen the wrong ally back then. I had once tried to devise a scheme to seduce the former Crown Prince, using him as a lifeline, but then I thought carefully. If the Sioux family's case were to be overturned, the Crown Prince was the Emperor's man. There was no guarantee he wouldn't suppress my request for the sake of imperial dignity. The Duke of the North was different. He stood on his own, respected even by the Emperor for his military achievements and dedication to the people. It was ironic. Both the Crown Prince and the Duke of the North were relatives of the enemy who had caused my family's ruin and my downfall. Yet now, I had to rely on the enemy's kin to clear the Sioux family's name and seek justice. After much thought, I completely gave up on Jiang Heji. Now I only needed to cling to the Duke of the North. Jiang Heji. I whispered his name softly. I had truly loved him once. Knowing he was unwilling and resentful, I still used tricks to bind him to my side. Given my identity at that time, our affair could only ever be a fleeting indulgence, but I had savored it. I really didn't understand why I became so addicted to him. What was it I loved about him? Maybe it was his clear and bright features like the radiant moon, or his upright, unyielding character. Now, this was for the best. He never loved me anyway, and now that we had become enemies, I had abandoned any thought of loving him. If he could, for the sake of the past when I never wronged him, simply ignore me, then that would be the best. But I was too naive. Jiang Heji clearly wasn't willing to let me go. The next day, he came again. At the time, I was refilling the wine for the Sioux Mansion's yamen. Jiang Heji kicked the yamen official to the ground, grabbed the wine jug from my hand, and smashed it on the floor. The official grabbed his black gauze hat and hurriedly fled. I put on a smile and spoke slowly as if addressing a noble guest. "Your Highness, why are you so angry? You've broken these things, and Miss 13 will deduct the cost from my wages." The pearwood table lost a corner. That's about 3 taels of silver. The wine glass was fine glassware from the western regions. 1 broken cup costs 5 taels. My monthly wages are only 4 taels. Jiang Heji's face turned ashen. His fists clenched tightly, but he said nothing, staring silently at me. Before, he wouldn't dare look at me directly. He came from a poor background. His mother earned only a few tens of coins a month washing clothes. His younger sister was sick, needing medicine every day. Though he was talented and ambitious, he was held down by a few taels of silver, forced to bow his head everywhere to survive. Su Yuesheng, in 1 month, I will marry you into the crown prince's mansion. When he said this, I happened to be crouching to pick up the fallen wine jug. Hearing his words, the jug slipped from my hands and hit the ground again. I straightened up and looked at him, tilting my head back. Marry me? As crown princess? His expression darkened, brows furrowed tightly. You're just the daughter of a criminal. Still dreaming of the crown princess title? In 1 month, I will marry Bai Jingshu as crown princess, and you will enter the mansion as a concubine on the same day. I lowered my head, kicked the expensive wine jug aside with my toe, then smiled and asked, On what basis? On what basis? He asked in a low voice. I shook my head in amusement, unsure where to start, and asked plainly, Why do you think I'd agree to become your concubine? He grabbed my wrist and pulled me close, his eyes sharp and fierce as he stared at me. You should know, you're mine for life. The day you bought me into the mansion, I never intended to let you go. Now I am the crown prince, and you're a Sioux. Sioux women are meant for the crown prince. I met his gaze without backing down. If you know I'm a Sioux, then why don't you know that Sioux women never become concubines? Jiang Heji, I admit I never wronged you before, but do you have to humiliate me like this? Do you think I'm humiliating you? He snapped, clutching my jaw with the web of his hand. Don't you love me? I don't believe you've changed your mind so quickly. If you don't want to marry me, then who do you want to marry? Want to marry Xiao Jiming? What's he to you? Just because I love you, I have to degrade myself and become your concubine? I cut him off, laughing bitterly. When I drove you out of the mansion that day, I told you I had fallen for someone else. Why did you think I still loved you? The sad truth was, I sent him away that day only because disaster was looming and I didn't want him to be caught up in it innocently. He had always been proud. If I had told him the truth, he might have stayed stubbornly in the mansion out of spite. So I had used that humiliating tactic to chase him away. I don't believe you. His eyes reddened at the corners, teeth clenched. You drove me away to protect me from being implicated. You lied to me. Do you insist on fooling yourself like this? I lifted my chin coldly. He stopped listening to me, his expression calm again. Turning his head, he said coldly, In 1 month, whether alive or dead, you will be mine. I advise you to behave yourself and wait quietly for the wedding day. Otherwise, your father in prison and your brother in the small courtyard won't have a good outcome. When Jiang Heji left, the door to the side room slammed shut with a deafening bang. 13 Yang passed by, glanced inside, calculated the compensation needed with her abacus, then walked away without a word. My anger simmered inside. I swept the pastries on the table harshly onto the floor, watching the carved wooden tray worth 5 taels roll several times before crouching down to pick it up. My father had been thrown into prison but had not yet been sentenced to death, all because his subordinates were working behind the scenes to negotiate. Over the past year, I had quietly gathered evidence at the brothel to help clear his name. Though it was a difficult process, I had not come away empty-handed. At least one thing was clear now. The false charges against my father were tied to the Bai family, and Bai Jingshu's father happened to be the new prime minister. To calm my restless mind, I practiced calligraphy while thinking about how to respond. Just then, Xiao Jiming showed up again. I thought that if he was here to listen to music today, I should at least play him the piece for getting the trap once the fish is caught. Xiao Jiming walked in, saw me bent over the desk, and stood displeased before snatching the brush from my hand. Holding back my temper, I looked up at him, but froze the moment I noticed his outfit. Why does this look so familiar? In a flash, I realized something and stared at him from head to toe, speechless. Xiao Jiming was a general, a horseman with a strong frame and broad shoulders, naturally suited to wear ornate robes and colorful garments. But now, he was dressed in a plain white scholar's robe, with long black hair draped behind him, an odd mismatch. This outfit, wasn't it just like Jiang Heji's look from 3 or 4 years ago? I couldn't figure out what he was trying to do. Xiao Jiming thought I was stunned by his appearance. A smile curled on his lips as he asked smugly, "Well, compared to Jiang Heji back then, don't I look even better now?" "Your Highness, what are you doing?" I turned my eyes away, but he reached out and forced my face to look at him, sneering, "Don't you like this poor scholar look?" "What? You don't think I wear it better than him?" "Your Highness, if you mean the former crown prince, then I have to tell you, I really dislike this outfit of yours. The longer you wear it, the less I'll like you too." He withdrew his hand, eyes deep as a dark pool, brows furrowed with displeasure, and disdainfully peeled off the clothes, grumbling, "Why didn't you say so earlier? How unlucky." I didn't quite understand what scheme Xiao Jiming was plotting. Though I was deeply disappointed in Jiang Heji, I did not want to be the sword Xiao Jiming used against him. Jiang Heji. The begonia tree in the courtyard shimmered with light, and the warm breeze scattered petals across the window. I picked up a duster, sweeping the petals that had fallen on the windowsill to the ground one by one. From the blazing sunlight to the dusk falling gently, I finally cleaned all the fallen blossoms. No trace of spring's fluttering remained. That day, I handed 13 Yang a string of coins and slipped out for a while. My little brother had been enslaved on the day our home was raided and sold to a merchant family as a cleaning boy. I was struggling to survive myself back then and couldn't care for him. After many twists and turns, I finally found him again. Now, using the silver I earned at the brothel, I had secretly placed him in a rural farmstead outside the city. Since Jiang Heji had discovered his existence, I needed to find a way to get him out of the capital safely. I carried a basket of books into the courtyard. My 7-year-old Su Yanqing sat upright at a worn-out desk, deeply engrossed in reading an old book. Hearing my footsteps, he turned his head, brightened his eyes, and jumped off the chair, running over with quick little footsteps. Sister, Yanqing missed you so much." He buried his head against my waist, holding on tightly. I stroked his head and glanced around with a bittersweet feeling. I couldn't afford a tutor for him, nor dare send him to school. For the past 6 months, he had been teaching himself, noting down words he didn't recognize, so he could ask me when I came. As usual, I reviewed his lessons with him before saying, "Yanqing, I have some things to take care of recently. I'm going to have Nanny take you away from the city for a while. Once everything's settled, I'll come back for you, all right?" Though young, he was sensible, his innocent, handsome face tinged with sadness. "Sister, did someone find out about Yanqing again and get you involved?" I touched his cheek. "No, it's just that I have things to do, and I'm worried it might drag you into danger. If you leave, I won't be held back." "Forget it. You don't have to go." Sister, I'll find another way." My thoughts were tangled, and my words kept wavering. I had planned to secretly send him away at night, but then I thought, Jiang Heji probably had many people watching inside and outside the courtyard. If he found out, Yanqing might end up inside the crown prince's mansion the next second. "Sister." Yanqing grabbed my sleeve, his little face very serious. "Sister, Yanqing isn't afraid to die. If it means Yanqing can live, and you have to make sacrifices, then sister, you have to let go. Yanqing hopes you live well and live a long life." I held back the tears in my eyes and said firmly, "Don't worry, sister won't let anything happen to you." A few days later, 13th Miss told me that Princess Yuan had specifically requested my presence at tomorrow's flower-picking banquet. The courtesans and musicians of the pleasure house were always prepared to entertain nobles from the palace and high officials from the court. Whenever there was a grand palace feast, the pleasure house would spend months preparing their performances. I quietly accepted the embroidered invitation bearing a magnolia blossom and murmured, "I understand." 13th Miss folded her arms and looked at me for a long moment before saying, "If you don't want to go, you could take some medicine and fake an illness. Of course, I'm not telling you to do that. But if you do, I'll still deduct your wages." I looked up at her, really studying her for the first time. Her hair was tied up neatly and shone jet black. Faint lines crept at the corners of her eyes, but they didn't diminish her graceful charm. I rubbed the corner of the invitation between two fingers. Thank you, 13th Miss, but I won't trouble anyone. I chose this path, and this day was bound to come sooner or later. If not at the princess's banquet, then at another noble's. The princess's banquet was an event that countless daughters of noble families and literati fought tooth and nail to attend. Tomorrow, surely every young man and woman of renown at court would have a seat, and I would face the countless eyes from which there was no escape. The next day, carrying a treasured guqin, I followed the others into the princess's residence. Princess Yuan was the beloved younger sister of the current emperor, well known for her poetry and favored greatly. As such, she was a patron to many scholars seeking advancement. I had never met Princess Yuan before, and I couldn't understand why, among nearly 10 musicians invited from the pleasure house, only I had received a personal invitation. But when I saw Bai Jingshu standing by Princess Yuan's side, I understood. At the flower-picking banquet, the courtyard stream flowed gently and crystal clear, with petals occasionally drifting down from the trees and floating along the water. To the left pavilion by the stream, a group of young men raised their cups and recited poetry. At the stone table on the right side of the stream, a lively group of noble ladies played guessing games with flower petals. Bai Jingshu stood beside the elegant Princess Yuan, twirling a handkerchief at her lips, speaking with feigned innocence. A group of people have been playing music here all afternoon, and they all wear veils, making it quite dull to listen to. I heard there's a talented one among these musicians. If only she would dance, the princess's banquet would be livelier. As soon as she said this, the men and women in the courtyard eagerly turned their eyes to me. My hand trembled slightly on the guqin strings. After a moment, I steadied myself and looked forward calmly from behind the veil. Since I already knew how things would turn out, what did I have to fear? I had long ago cast aside my pride the day I entered the pleasure house, the day I was despised and told I should have died with my mother. Princess Yuan asked with interest, "Oh, which talented one? Let me see her." A look of triumph flashed in Bai Jingshu's eyes as she pointed straight at me. "Princess, look. That's Su Yueshang, the legitimate daughter of the Su family, which was destroyed. She loves to show off in public, but after entering the pleasure house, she probably hasn't had many chances to appear at such grand banquets. Since you are kind and value talent, why not give her a chance?" Bai Jingshu probably didn't realize that I had been learning to understand palace politics since I was 7. Amid the murmurs of the crowd, I stepped forward and bowed deeply. "I attend upon your highness, the princess. I've only been in the pleasure house a short time. Though I practice diligently every day, my dancing skills are still inferior to the others. Furthermore, today's flower-picking banquet emphasizes elegance. Both the drinking games and the music are refined and pleasing to the heart. If I were to perform a dance, I would spoil the elegance of the occasion. I have studied literature with my family's teacher. If your highness does not mind, I would be honored to present a poem to add a touch of grace to your banquet today." Compared to watching a clumsy, vulgar dance, a beautiful poem held much greater appeal for Princess Yuan, and she graciously accepted my request. As expected, her eyes and brows lit up with a smile, more interested than before. "In that case, Qing He, prepare paper and brush for her." Under Bai Jingshu's resentful glare, I accepted the brush and ink handed to me by a palace maid. The former eldest daughter of the Su family was famed not only for her beauty, said to surpass all in the capital, but even more so for her calligraphy and poetry. I gazed at the magnolia flowers in the courtyard, pure and serene like jade, then bowed my head and began to write. In just a few breaths, the brush paused and the ink dried on the paper. What followed was that the poem circulated several times during the banquet, eventually even leaving the princess's residence. Though unsigned, it was praised throughout the capital as a masterpiece born of a talented hand. Of course, that was later. After I finished, Princess Yuan came from the main seat and approached me, bending down to lift the veil from my face, studying me closely. "You should have been my nephew's wife. Quite a good match for him. It's a pity now, but I've heard the crown prince plans to take you as his consort." For you, that is a great blessing. I heard he knelt outside the Qingtian Hall for 3 days and nights to win approval from the Tian family, even betting he'd quell the tax rebellion in Nanchang within a month. Do you know his position isn't stable? This act is a gamble with his own future. She spoke on her own without waiting for my reply, and then swept away, as if she merely wished to tell me this. Why Jiang Heji insisted on marrying me, I asked myself. I owed him nothing. Could he really hate me so much just because of those 3 years past? Behind an artificial rock formation, Bai Jingshu blocked my path. I held my guqin and looked at her.
courtesan.
How can you be so shameless? What did you do that the crown prince insists on making you his consort? She gripped my wrist tightly, grinding her teeth. With your lowly status, what right do you have to serve the crown prince alongside me? You wretched woman, look at me. She raised her hand to strike, and I instinctively reached out to block. Suddenly, her foot slipped. She cried out, awe, and fell backward. My hand hung in midair. I looked down at Bai Jingshu fallen on the ground, speechless for a moment. Su Yuesheng, why did you push me? Her teary eyes looked up at me. Her raised palm was bright red. I didn't want to deal with her, turning to leave. But as I turned, I saw Jiang Heji. I didn't know when he had appeared behind me. His gaze fixed sharply on me. I looked at him, then back at Bai Jingshu, and suddenly understood. Bai Jingshu ran to him, feigning innocence, complaining, Brother Crown Prince, I only wanted to say a few words to her, and she was so vicious, she pushed me to the ground. You must stand up for me. How dare such a lowly woman treat me this way? I avoided Jiang Heji's gaze. I wanted to explain, but the words died on my lips. A fallen tiger doesn't fight dogs. Even if only I knew she did it on purpose, I knelt, preparing to apologize. Jiang Heji's cold voice cut through. I am the crown prince, not a fool. I looked up. He was staring at Bai Jingshu. Those dirty tricks you learned in the back chambers, if you try them again in front of me, I guarantee your death will be ugly. Bai Jingshu's face went pale. Too angry to speak, she glared venomously at me. Brother Crown Prince, I was wrong. I was just upset. How could such a wretched woman be worthy? Shut up. Jiang Heji's face darkened. Then he turned to me, his voice cold as if venting frustration. Aren't you leaving yet? Do you want me to have you carried out in a grand sedan chair? Confused, I silently watched their staged performance, bowed my head, and quickly left. Just as I stepped out the side gate of the princess's residence, a cloak suddenly covered me from the front. Flustered, I pulled it off, and saw a man clad in armor standing before me. Xiao Jiming, clad in black armor, sat astride a tall horse. He leaned down to look into my eyes and said helplessly, I was only out for a few days to quell the rebellion. How come someone's already after you again? What kind of worthless princess lets you come just like that? I tossed the black cloak back to him, clutching my guqin. The princess is your sister. What kind of tone is that? What kind of sister is she? I haven't even spoken more than a few words with her. Didn't I give you a token? Why didn't you use it? He spread the cloak wide, roughly draping it over me again, tying a tight knot in front, then pulled the hood over my head. My vision darkened. I reached up to lift the hood, but a large hand pressed firmly against mine. I could only reply, this is my livelihood. Each trip I make earns me several taels of silver. Why would I refuse? A cold snort came from beside me. The next moment, a strong hand lifted me at the waist and hoisted me onto the horse. The warm body behind me pressed close. Before I could react, the horse under me galloped out of the alley. Xiao Jiming wrapped me tightly in the cloak with one hand, leaving no gaps, while holding the reins with the other as we charged through the bustling market. Shouts and cries followed us all along the way. Cradling my guqin, Xiao Jiming carried me off the horse and strode quickly into his mansion. It wasn't until the surroundings brightened that I opened my eyes and looked around. It was his princely residence. I had been brought here twice, both times forcibly like this. Thankfully, each time he made sure to wrap me up tightly, so outsiders only knew that the king of Dingbei had taken a woman into his mansion, but had no idea who she was. What are you going to do now? I was thirsty, so I reached for the tea on the table, which surprisingly was still warm. Let me show you something. He tossed his sword to a guard behind him and sat beside me, long limbs relaxed. I patiently waited for him to show me whatever it was. Xiao Jiming sometimes went a bit mad like this. He'd find some interesting things and insist I look at them. I guess these were probably things he wanted to show the woman in the painting, but for now, I was the substitute. A large chest was brought in by the servants. Under his urging, I opened it and almost fainted at what I saw. Sister? There was nothing inside but my younger brother. I quickly pulled him out and examined him carefully, anxiously asking, "How are you? Are you all right?" "I'm fine, sister," Su Yanqing answered obediently. I pulled him behind me, biting back my anger and grit my teeth. "Xiao Jiming, what exactly are you planning?" He looked a little agitated now and squatted down to reach for Su Yanqing. I stepped forward warily, watching him. "You got it wrong. I wasn't going to capture him. Su, little brother, tell her yourself. How did you end up in the chest?" Su Yanqing tugged my sleeve from behind and looked up at me. "Sister, I didn't know those people and I was scared. So I crawled into the chest. Didn't you have me hide in a chest the day when father was captured?" Xiao Jiming hurried to explain. "I'm not arresting him. I just invited him over. Your little courtyard is full of the crown prince's men. Do you really think he'd be safe there?" Only then did I come to my senses again, still keeping Su Yanqing behind me. I whispered, "My lord, we agreed back then. I can serve you and do anything you command, but you must not harm my brother." "I didn't," he stopped smiling, his eyes clouded with thought. "You don't have many vulnerabilities. Only these two. If I don't strike first, what would you do if your brother fell into the crown prince's hands? Would you really marry the crown prince? I tell you, that will never happen." I gripped Su Yanqing's hand tightly. A sudden wave of despair washed over me. After all this time, I had reached this point, and yet I was still so easily controlled and trampled by everyone. Seeing me silent, Xiao Jiming's throat suddenly tightened. He seemed to think he might have been too harsh with his words. He paced a few steps, the heavy armor clanking, then after a moment muttered, "What is he anyway, daring to want you as a consort? You loved him before. With your head, you'd be fooled by him again in no time. From now on, you two stay here in the mansion. Without my permission, you're not allowed anywhere else." Saying that, he turned and left without looking back, leaving us alone in the hall, exchanging glances. Su Yanqing peeked out and asked, "Sister, why is he so angry?" I shook my head. His possessiveness over the woman in the painting was too strong. Luckily, I never thought about marrying, otherwise on my wedding day, he might just draw his sword and kill my husband. Though Xiao Jiming had me confined within the mansion, thinking it over, the Dingbei King's residence was actually a very good place. Not to mention Zhonghiji, even the current emperor wouldn't dare step into this mansion casually. Leaving Su Yanqing here made me feel much safer. After that harsh warning, Xiao Jiming didn't return for several days. The servants in the mansion were well-trained and treated me with utmost respect, but whenever I tried to ask questions, they fell silent. Fortunately, though Xiao Jiming said he was confining me here, he tacitly allowed me to come and go freely. That day, I took a carriage from the rear side gate of the mansion. Following my directions, the driver headed straight northwest to the Ministry of Justice's prison. According to the laws of Great Qian, prisoners in the Ministry of Justice could be visited by relatives once every 6 months. Today happened to be the visitation day for the second half of the year. After showing my token and having the wardens inspect the carefully prepared food and clothes I brought, I was allowed to enter. The prison was dark, damp, and grim. When I first came, I was terrified by the hands of prisoners reaching out, unable to move forward. It was Xiao Jiming who brought a bamboo hat and covered me with it, then led me to my father's cell. Now, I silently stared at the path ahead, no longer afraid of the wailing sounds beside me. "Father." I came to the last prison cell and looked at the person lying on the straw. Tearfully, I called out. But I shouted for a long time, and he didn't respond at all. "Father? Father?" My heart felt like it was being squeezed hard, my breath stopped, and a familiar terror shot through my entire body. I yelled at the prison guard and desperately shook the iron lock on the door. When the door was finally opened, I stumbled inside, helplessly reaching out with my fingertips. Fortunately, Fortunately, there was still a faint breath. I didn't care about the cause, just urged desperately, "Find a doctor. Hurry, find a doctor." The guard glanced at my father, who was not dead yet, and said, "He's not dead, so what? These are all serious criminals locked up here. Without orders from above, who dares to bring them a doctor? Many here don't make it. Once they die, it's over. We can't get a doctor for everyone." I tried to threaten him. "Do you know who is in this cell?" "I don't care who's in the cell. They're all sentenced to be beheaded. No orders, no doctor. Hurry up and get out after you're done." I held my father's hands, cold as ice, terrified beyond words. I wiped my tears and hurried out, racing against time. Xiao Jiming was not at the manor. I couldn't count on him. The prison was in the northwest, only a half-quarter hour from the Crown Prince's residence. I gripped the jade pendant tightly, urging the carriage to go faster and faster. In my heart, I thought, "Jiang Heji, please save my father. If you save him, I will marry you, even as a concubine. Just help me save my father." Holding the Crown Prince's jade pendant, I stood outside his mansion. The guards, seeing the pendant, immediately went to report. I leaned against the stone step at the gate, my head spinning, but I forced myself to keep looking straight into the mansion. Soon, the messenger came back and reported. The Crown Prince replied that he's currently with the future Crown Princess picking out her wedding dress. He has no time now. "Miss, please leave." I clenched the pendant tightly, unwilling to give up. "Did you tell him this is a matter of life and death? That I beg him to save a life?" He said, "I told him exactly that, but that's how he answered." Could you ask again?" "Please ask again." I gripped the pendant, utterly desperate. Suddenly, the carriage driver shouted, "Miss Sue, it's the prince." I turned and saw a black steed galloping over from afar. The man on the horse had his long hair tied high, dressed in black armor shining in the light. I ran to him, clutching his dragon boots like a life-saving straw. "Prince." Xiao Jiming looked up at the Crown Prince's mansion plaque, said nothing, and picked me up around the waist. "Get on, Prince." "Shut up. If you want to save your father, then don't talk." "I don't want to hear it now." He grabbed my arm, stormed into the prison, kicked open a cell door, and pushed a doctor waiting nearby inside. "Open your eyes wide and watch carefully. If you can't cure him, then watch out for your own life." Ignoring Xiao Jiming's angry glare, I broke free from his grip and followed into the cell, anxiously squatting to watch the doctor's every move. Outside the cell, Xiao Jiming stood like a grim deity, his long sword at his side. No one dared approach. "Your father was poisoned. Fortunately, he didn't ingest much, and luckily I arrived in time. If I had been any later, your father might never wake again. I've already administered acupuncture and prepared the medicine. Have him take it 3 times a day for 7 days, and he will fully recover." I took the prescription, my mind focused solely on this matter, rushing to prepare the medicine without even glancing at Xiao Jiming. He lifted his leg to block me, snatched the prescription, and threw it to a guard behind him, ordering him to prepare the medicine. "Where do you think you're going with that? By the time you make the medicine and come back, your father will already be dead." He looked at me annoyed. I approached him solemnly and bowed. "Thank you, Prince. Thank you for saving a life." He snorted coldly, speaking sarcastically. "No need to thank me. You would rather seek the Crown Prince than ride back with my carriage. I'm just your fallback option. What's there to thank me for?" I straightened up and replied seriously, "No. The servants said you've been out for days. I knew you weren't here, so there was no point in coming. Because you weren't here, I turned to Jiang Heji as a second choice." He suddenly froze. The fierce look on his face didn't return. His expression twisted, and after a moment he muttered, "Is that really true?" I nodded. His ears flushed red, then a smile curved his lips as he turned me away. Stay outside. Don't come in. I'll take care of Chancellor Su. I squatted outside the cell, holding a twig and absent-mindedly scratching the dirt. The faint sounds inside the cell gradually quieted. Xiao Jiming beckoned me inside. I went in and saw my father's clothes, soaked with sweat from the acupuncture, had been changed. His previously disheveled hair was neatly combed. I took a handkerchief to wipe the sweat from his forehead and whispered, "Thank you." After giving him the medicine, we waited a long while before my father finally woke up. "Father? You're awake. How do you feel?" I leaned close and asked softly, "Chang'e, was I dreaming? It's been so long since I last saw you." He raised his hand and stroked my head. I choked up, "Father, it wasn't a dream. I came to see you today. Someone poisoned your food, almost. He looked up at the ceiling and said slowly, "After I ate that poisoned meal, my only regret was not seeing you and Yanqing again." Xiao Jiming then spoke. "Chancellor Su, is this the chance you've been waiting for? Risking your life." That day in the prison, some secrets were hidden. I knew clearly that my father would never accept defeat. What I had to do was, when that day came, to use my identity as the eldest daughter of the Su family to turn that evidence into courtroom proof. Later, despite Xiao Jiming's opposition, I returned to the music bureau, and step by step, I wove a net, investigating everyone related to the case from a year ago. The 1-month deadline Jiang Heji mentioned was running out. On the approaching 5th day, he sent a bright red wedding dress. I didn't even look up and ordered it thrown out immediately. In front of everyone, he personally dismounted and picked up the wedding dress, carefully folding it inch by inch and placing it into a pearwood box. He asked me, "What are you making a fuss about? Why don't you believe me? I really don't want to marry you. The wedding dress you sent only makes me feel disgusted." His expression stiffened immediately, as if struck by lightning, silent for a long time. His sharp jaw clenched tightly, and in his narrow phoenix-like eyes flickered a paranoid madness. In the dead silence, he suddenly let out a cold laugh. "Whether you want to or not, 5 days from now, you will be mine. You can't escape." 5 days later, I wrapped myself in coarse linen clothes. Before leaving, I took one last look at the towering pile of red wooden boxes, then pushed the door open without looking back. On me were countless testimonies, account books, and letters collected over the past year. At the end of Chang'an Street's palace walls stood all those who had fought alongside me this year. Some were my father's former students, some were commoners my father had helped, and some were young officials willing to follow in my father's footsteps. The imperial drums sounded, reaching the royal hearing, but no one paid attention. Xiao Jiming raised his chin and said to me, "Keep beating. I'll go into the palace to urge the still unconscious emperor. I suppose in his old age he's prone to dreams and needs someone to wake him." Finally, the emperor, disturbed beyond endurance, sat on the dragon throne, angrily glaring at Xiao Jiming. "Who is that outside? Why are you beating drums so early?" I prostrated myself and said, "I am Su Yuzhang, daughter of the disgraced Minister Su Yu. Today I beat the drums to disturb the imperial hearing, only to seek justice for my father's corruption case." The emperor, who had witnessed decades of storm and strife, knew the Su family case inside out, yet still asked, "What injustice is there?" My father was never corrupt. He was framed by villains. These are the evidences I have collected. Please, Your Majesty, take a look. I looked around and noticed that Chancellor Bai was inexplicably absent from the hall, while all the civil and military officials were present, including Jiang Heji, who was supposed to marry Bai Jingshu today. He stood not far from me, his gaze fixed firmly on me, showing no hint of joy about the wedding. Absurd. Where is Bai Jushan? That man still dares to poison in the Ministry of Justice prison and make a fool of me. Good. The emperor angrily pounded the dragon throne, and all officials knelt in fear, except the crown prince and King Dingbei. Jiang Heji addressed the front. "I have a report. Bai Jushan secretly minted copper coins in Sunan, openly sold official positions among the people to amass wealth, and even allowed his son to forcibly seize commoners' land. He is guilty of multiple crimes. I have presented all evidence. To prevent his escape, I have ordered the Bai family to be surrounded. Your Majesty, please decide. I knelt, Jiang Heji's voice ringing in my ears, stunned for a moment. If it were just one charge of slander, it wouldn't be punishable by death. But these multiple crimes together meant Bai Jeshan would likely face immediate execution. But wasn't Jiang Heji supposed to marry Bai Jingxu today? That day, the court was chaotic. I didn't know much about court affairs, only that getting my father's case overturned was enough. Yet in the end, Bai Jishan's case was dragged out, the matter escalating, and soon the entire Bai family was condemned, wiped out overnight. Just as I was about to depart in the carriage out of the palace, someone forcibly stopped it. Outside the carriage, Xiao Jiming's voice was full of anger. Crown Prince, why stop my carriage? Jiang Heji didn't answer him, only said to me inside the carriage, Su Yuzhang, you can't go with him. I lifted the curtain and looked down at him. Perhaps we had looked at each other too long. Xiao Jiming sneered and drew his sword, about to strike the horse's rear. Jiang Heji raised his palm and caught the blade with his bare hand. Blood dripped from his palm. I furrowed my brow and was about to speak. Jiang Heji's eyes reddened slightly, his face pale as if drowning in immense sorrow. He looked into my eyes and spoke word by word. You are the crown princess. Always you. The wedding dress was made to your measurements, embroidered with your favorite spring begonia. The red bridal veil was designed by me, with the special spring flowers you like. The phoenix crown was adorned with tears of the Nanhai mermaid, only worthy for you. But you threw them all on the street. It's all right, I picked them up. If you think they're dirty, I can make them again. I can draw them again. My heart, which should have been calm and still twisted bitterly at his few words. Jiang Heji lowered his head, trembling slightly. Miss Yuzhang, I beg you, Heji begs you, don't leave. I parted my lips, but felt a lump in my throat. In those 3 years, every time he saw me, he bowed and addressed me as Miss Yuzhang to mark the distance between us. That Miss Yuzhang used to be his proud, unyielding scholar posture. Today it was a humble, crushed plea. He should have known clearly there was no going back between us.
But there was one thing I still wanted to ask.
On the 7th day of the 6th month, when I came to your mansion begging for help for my father, you said that jade pendant could be used to ask a favor from you. But why didn't you respond that day? He looked up in a panic, as if he realized something, his expression painfully uncontrollable. He looked terrified. He raised his bloodied hand and carefully grabbed the hem of my clothes. I didn't receive any jade pendant.
I
didn't know you came. I really didn't know, Yuzhang. I asked him. That day, Bai Jingxu was at your mansion, wasn't she? He nodded anxiously. She was there that day, but I was very busy. I was in the study all day. I didn't see her, I didn't. Halfway through, he realized what was going on. His face turned deathly pale, staring blankly at me. I gripped the wooden table of the carriage, so tightly my nails broke. I closed my eyes, tears dropping like pearls.